Most gardeners think planting garlic is almost foolproof. Break the bulb into cloves, put them in the soil, cover them, and wait. But there are several small mistakes that can make all that work much less rewarding. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how we plant garlic, what we learned from our harvest, and the simple things we do differently to get better bulbs. One of the most important things we pay attention to when planting garlic is depth. Garlic cloves shouldn't simply sit near the surface. They need to be planted deep enough to stay firmly in the soil and develop a strong root system. This becomes especially important when the soil is difficult to work with. In our garden, the soil can be very wet and heavy after long periods of rain. When that happens, creating deep, clean planting furrows isn't easy. But we still try to plant the cloves as deeply as we can. Here's why we don't like planting garlic too shallow. Garlic has a tendency to move upward in the soil, and loose soil can make this even easier. There is another problem that gardeners don't always think about. Birds can disturb freshly planted cloves while searching through the soil. A clove that has been pushed upward may not be positioned properly when colder weather arrives. So instead of simply dropping the cloves into the soil, we make proper furrows and place them down firmly. The goal is simple. Keep the cloves stable and give them enough soil around them to start developing roots. But depth isn't the only thing that matters. Another important decision happens before the clove ever reaches the soil. Which clove should you plant? When we prepare garlic for planting, we don't simply use every piece from the bulb. We select the large outer cloves. The smaller cloves from the center are not our first choice for planting. We want strong, healthy planting material because the clove you plant becomes the starting point for the new plant. And when we had a good harvest the previous season, we could select our best garlic specifically for planting. There's another small detail that we pay attention to. We try to keep the protective skin around the clove intact. We don't want to damage the cloves unnecessarily while preparing them for planting. So before planting, our selection process is very simple. Large cloves, healthy cloves, minimal damage, and as much of the protective skin intact as possible. Now, let's talk about spacing. We make rows approximately 20 centimeters apart, and we leave roughly the same amount of space between the individual cloves. The exact distance isn't something we measure with a ruler every time. We simply try to give each plant enough room to grow. One thing we definitely don't want is garlic packed tightly together. When you're planting a whole bed, it can be tempting to squeeze in as many cloves as possible. But we're growing the plants for the bulbs, not simply to fill the bed. Timing is another part of the equation. In this particular garden, we were planting on November 15th. We could have planted earlier, but the work was delayed. The weather forecast was showing temperatures dropping soon, including temperatures around -2 degrees Celsius. So we decided it was time to get the garlic into the ground. The important thing here isn't simply copying our exact calendar date. Your planting window depends on your local climate and soil conditions. What we wanted was to get the cloves planted before the colder weather arrived. This year we also tried something different. Alongside the garlic we've grown successfully before, we planted 2 new varieties. We labeled them separately because we wanted to see how they would perform in our garden. This is something I highly recommend if you're experimenting with garlic. Don't mix everything together. Keep new varieties labeled. Then you can compare the results at harvest time. Sometimes a variety that looks impressive on paper simply doesn't perform as well in your particular soil and climate. And this is where things get interesting. When we harvested the garlic the following season, the weather had been extremely challenging. There was very little rain. We didn't use additional feeding or treatments. And yet, the garlic still produced a harvest. Some bulbs were large. Others were noticeably smaller. And we noticed something interesting when comparing them. The thicker, stronger-looking plants produced much better bulbs. The thinner plants produced much smaller heads. And remember those 2 new varieties we planted? Now we could finally compare them. One of them performed poorly. Most of the bulbs had thin necks and weren't particularly impressive. But the second variety looked much better. The bulbs were larger, and the necks were thicker. So we may keep that variety and continue growing it in the future. This is exactly why we like testing new varieties in small sections first. Your garden can tell you more than a seed packet ever will. So, what can we learn from this? Garlic doesn't need to be complicated, but the details matter. Start with good planting material. Choose strong outer cloves. Keep the protective skin intact. Give the cloves enough space. Plant them firmly and deep enough for your conditions. And choose your planting time based on your local weather and climate. Most importantly, don't assume that every variety will perform the same way in your garden. And here's another garlic experiment we tried, rocambole. Rocambole can produce incredibly large single cloves when it is grown under certain conditions. In our case, we planted the cloves in spring instead of fall. As a result, we ended up with these huge single cloves instead of fully divided bulbs. This year, we're planting them in the fall. Our goal is to grow full-sized rocambole bulbs with multiple large cloves. We're also keeping the small bulbils so we can continue propagating this variety. It's another experiment we'll be following in our garden. And if you want to grow bigger garlic next season, don't just plant and forget. Test different varieties. Keep your best planting stock. And pay attention to what your own garden is telling you. If you grow garlic, tell me in the comments. When do you plant your garlic, and what variety gives you the biggest bulbs? And don't forget to subscribe for more real garden experiments, growing tips, and harvest results.